Welcome to the Korea Society, everybody. It's so great to have you here. The Wedding Banquet, as you just saw, is a joyful comedy of errors about chosen family navigating the disasters and delights of family expectations, queerness, and cultural identity. With a pitch perfect cast of multi generational talent that includes Bowen Yang, Academy Award nominee Lily Gladstone, Kelly Marie Tran, Han Gi Chan, Joan Chen, and of course, Academy Award winner Yoon Yo Jung. This fresh reimagining of Ang Lee's beloved rom com is a poignant reminder that being a part of family means learning both to accept and forgive. And we are thrilled to welcome back to the Korea Society the director of this new film, Andrew An. Andrew is a queer Korean American filmmaker based in Los Angeles. His films include Fire Island, Driveways, and Spa Night. He has directed both fiction and documentary television and streaming series, including Bridgerton, Generation, and lately, Desi Boys. Welcome to the Korea Society, Andrew, in person.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. The last time we talked, it was during the pandemic, so it was only online. So it's
Yeah,
great to actually have you here.
I know. Yeah, it's
So,
fun.
and I have to admit, I am old enough to have seen The Wedding Banquet by
I
Ang
am too.
Lee.
Yes.
So when did you see that film?
Yeah, I saw the film when it came out. Not in theaters, but when it went to home video. My family was, video rental store family. We went every week, and my mom saw the VHS for Ang Lee's The Wedding Banquet, and she was like, "Oh, this is that movie with Asian people that white people are watching. We should see what it's about." Um, and so she rented it, not knowing that it was a queer film. And we watched it as a family. And, as a nascent gay boy, it really resonated. It kind of stuck with me, even if I didn't exactly know why. Um, and, in retrospect, I know that, that was the first gay film that I'd ever seen. And the fact that it was a gay and Asian film and a film told with so much humanity, it really, put me on the right path as a filmmaker, as a person. And so it feels very full circle in a way to get the real privilege and honor of reimagining it for today.
Yes, because it is not a remake of the film in the sense that there are different characters, storyline is different. So, what would be your choice of word describing its relationship to the reimagining?
I think maybe that's
Yeah.
the most accurate way to describe it. But I think there is so much of the kind of attitude of the original film that I wanted to retain, and there's still, I think, that balance of family and cultural identity and sexuality in the film, in both films. Um, but yeah, like I don't want to say it's a remake because it's a very different plot in many respects.
And so, where did this reimagining of the wedding banquet start? Was it your ideas? Did somebody suggest it to you? And why did you decide that the wedding banquet should be reimagined?
Yeah, our producers, Anita Guo and Caroline Clark, their company Kindred Spirit, held the rights to Ang Lee's The Wedding Banquet, as well as two of his other films, Pushing Hands and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. And um, Anita had approached James Seamus and Joe Piro, our other producers on the project, asking, should we consider something like this? And if so, who should we talk to? A potential, writer, director. Um, and Joe Piro, James Seamus, they produced my second feature, Driveways. and so they had suggested that Anita chat with me, and so I chatted with Anita in January 2019. Um, and I was very hesitant. I didn't necessarily want to do it because the film is so meaningful to me. Um, but I thought about how different, things are for the queer community now, uh, you know, compared to 1993. And one of those things, obviously, is gay marriage. And I am in this life phase, with my partner where that's, been a big conversation. And then this topic of having children, that became, something that was a consideration in my life. And I wondered if instead of in the original film where having a baby is an accident, what if they want to have a baby, and how do you go through that as queer people? My boyfriend and I, the first time we had that conversation about kids, he told me, if it happens, it happens. And I was like, no, it doesn't. Not for gay people. Like, you can't whoopsie daisy a baby. As queer people, we have to be incredibly intentional. And so any sort of hesitation can become a giant obstacle. And so, for me, I saw these two very kind of new conversations, that queer people were having, that I felt, could be explored in a reimagining of the wedding banquet, with kind of the same level of humanity and comedy and drama as the Ang Lee film.
It certainly does. But as you said, a lot has changed since 1993. But we could also say that many things has not. What elements of the 1993 film you felt most meaningful carrying forward, and what did you feel needed to be reimagined for today's audience?
Yeah. I love how much the 1993 film uh, understands how culture and sexuality, like, they're very intertwined. Especially when you think about how culture can be so heteronormative, like certain rituals. And so I loved how that original film didn't try and kind of silo these parts of the main character, right? That, like, he was having to grapple with it all. And that, to me, was something that I wanted to keep as a part of this film. I it's maybe the most obvious, but one of the changes is that I made this one Korean, and I'm here at the Korea Society. I'm Korean. I wanted to make the film feel personal to me. It felt like the most truthful way to reimagine this film. And Korean weddings, I remember going to my brother's wedding 10 years ago, and he had a pebek ceremony, and I remember watching it, and it was the first time that I had seen that in person, and it was so much fun for me to see. I saw how it brought my brother closer to my parents. I saw how that brought him closer to his wife. It brought him closer to his Korean identity, and it made me feel kind of sad that because I'm gay, I wondered if I could participate in something like this, and like just the part of the pebek where the groom gives a piggyback ride to the bride. Like, I wondered in a gay wedding, like, who piggybacks who, and like what colors do you wear? Like that, you know, the ritual would have to shift in some way. Um, and so, I in some ways wanted to make this film as a way to kind of throw myself my own Korean wedding, and my parents came and,
Oh, to the when you were shooting.
while we were filming, yeah, and it was really like funny and I was very emotional and um I think there were many things about my kind of experiences that I used as um, kind of creative North Stars in the adaptation, and filmmaking process.
Yeah, because we can talk about that. I was going to ask you about that a little later, but we can talk about it. The wedding banquet in this movie is the sort of the wedding ceremony that throw together, which comes together really beautifully given that they really didn't have that much time to plan for it. But it's the traditional Korean wedding ceremony,
Yeah.
the 전통 혼례,
Yeah.
as it is known in Korean, followed by the pebek, which is the bowing ceremony when the bride is kind of introduced to her new family, the in-laws. Um, so you talked about how you wanted to make it a personal one, therefore that's Korean. As a filmmaker, how did you prepare for that shoot and what kind of things you wanted to talk about that is very specific in the Korean ceremonies? Because, and also it's kind of interesting because the one character is Min is Korean, but the bride is not,
Yeah.
and but they all participate too.
Yeah. Yeah. We really pulled kind of resources from multiple places to try and, as accurately as possible, like show these ceremonies. What I found really interesting was that even with like experts, there was like interpretability, even just in the level in which you like hide your face,
When you're
like
bowing.
yeah, like it was funny. It was like sometimes is it all the way up? Is it halfway down?
So
Uh,
it's really like a wedding. Everybody has their own opinions
Has
how things should
opinions,
be done.
yeah, yeah. Like so we worked with a consultant in Vancouver. Leah from Wedding Story. She was this kind of incredible resource of information, but also some of the props and the set dressing. And then she had connected us to um, uh, uh, a cultural like heritage bearer who had moved recently to Vancouver, who is the officiant in the film, um, and she kind of was very detail oriented. There's a belt that Bowen Yang wears in his hanbok, and there is it was like, does it go above the knot or below the knot? And there were conversations had about like the kind of accuracy of it, and then what one says versus the other. And then we had videos from my brother's wedding. We had videos from our cinematographer Kijun Kim's wedding. We were just like pulling together as much information. And for me, it was such a joy to be able to learn about a ritual so in depth. One of my first short films I made was a film called Dol, and about a 돌잔치, and I find ritual so fascinating because it, it gives people the opportunity to like reflect and then also express themselves. There's something about marking something in time, with a ritual that I think just allows for communication, and that's something that like families can be bad at. And so I just wanted to pay as much respect to the rituals, and to show, potentially how they could be expanded to be more inclusive in a way.
And it is a beautiful ceremony, and the costume is just absolutely gorgeous, and everything. Then other things happen during the ceremony that you'll have to watch and find out. But I kind of want to go back to what you said about what you wanted to keep from the original,
Mhm.
the 1993 banquet, wedding banquet. The character was really struggling with all these different things, and it was not siloed. It's like
Mhm.
his issues are not compartmentalized. It's like kind of combination of everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's really evident in this film. I mean, there are so many quote unquote issues that you deal with in this film, from immigration to gay marriage to IVF and chosen family and all these things. But at least I never felt while I was watching it that you are making a movie about issues. It's a
Mhm.
story of these people,
Mhm.
this particular group of people. And so I wanted to ask, as a screenwriter, you co-wrote the screenplay with James Schamus, and as a director, how do you keep that balance? This is a group of people who comes with a lot of stereotypes and cliches and tropes attached to it, and same thing with all the issues that you kind of deal with. So how do you make a film about this group of people while avoiding all these cliches, but also not be preachy about it?
Yeah. I think uh, you do as much work as possible, obviously, in the screenplay phase. Trying to find the humanity of these characters. Understand their relationships. Um, I, I think you have to involve your collaborators to really, you know, finally bring life to these, characters. And I always knew that I wanted to have a very um, uh, like a very collaborative process, a process where I um, allowed these actors to personalize these characters, because that would make those characters feel more human, and that humanity would then um, come to the forefront of the filmmaking, the kind of film watching experience. And so the themes and the plot, kind of just nestle in under it, as opposed to kind of poking out through it in an uncomfortable or obvious way. And so, every chance I got, there was a kind of a process of conversation and kind of rewriting, to make these characters feel just more personal and inspiring to each actor. Yoon Yo Jung, when we sent her the script, the character of Min's grandmother was initially actually Min's mother. And she was very humble about it. She said, "I feel a little old to be playing, the mother of this character, but what about grandmother?" And we started talking about how that might change their
Right.
relationship and their dynamic. And I could see how excited she got. And for me, that excitement, when you see that in an actor's eyes, um, you nourish it, right? And so, we made those adjustments. There's a very touching scene between Yoon Yo Jung and the actor playing her grandson in the film, where they talk about his artwork, that's made by the incredibly talented Julia Kwan. Um, and I remember Yoon Yo Jung telling me in our first conversation, she said, "That scene isn't good yet. Like, it has to be written better." It was very, very grandmotherly, you know.
You
And
need to do better.
yes, exactly. And it was interesting. Like, I took a lot of pride in that actually because it felt like she knew that we could do better, right? That there was more potential, and we rewrote that scene, with 선생님's kind of guidance, and then also some insight from my cinematographer, and suddenly the scene came together in this really special way. And so, I think it's through that process that uh, you really create a film that feels kind of organic and holistic as opposed to kind of too obvious.
Right. Like it's not like you're putting this character in there because that should be a representation of
Exactly.
somebody, or it's just
Yeah.
their character, their people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But speaking of the actors, I mean, the cast is just incredible. Bowen Yang, Kelly Mary Tran, Lily Gladstone, Yoon Jung, Joan Chen. Oh, like it's so great to see her after all these
Yeah.
years. Um, did you get everybody you wanted?
Yeah. I mean, this is the cast I wanted, like, uh, I knew as we were writing the screenplay that, oh, this is a really, it's a big cast, and, each character is really important, and they also felt super specific. Um, and so our casting director, Jenny Ju, and Jenny had cast Okja, director Bong's film. I just really trusted her, and we had a lot of conversations, and, just thought about kind of the soul of each character, and of course, like, adjustments could get made in order to kind of fit the actor, like Yoon Jung being grandmother, and so we really just kind of tackled it role by role. Bowen Yang, obviously, I'd worked with him on Fire Island. I think his ability to um, be so vulnerable on screen is really special, and I think you immediately kind of sympathize and understand kind of what he's going through. um, Lily Gladstone, just such an incredible actress. When we were looking for that character, we wanted to find someone who had a caretaking quality, and you know I think Lily has that so naturally. um, Kelly Marie Tran, just that balance between comedy and drama. I don't think anybody does it better. Han Gi-chan is an actor from Korea, who I had seen in a couple of dramas, BL shows, boys love shows. And so I knew, he was very comfortable playing gay characters. And, when I met him on Zoom, I had this sense from him, just that, like, he could embody this character. And when we shot the film in Vancouver, it was his first time in North America. It was his first time acting in English, and like, he didn't know what jet lag was,
Oh,
because he had never left Asia before, and
wow.
he was so tired, and he was like, "Why am I tired?" And I was like, "Jet lag." But yeah, and then Joan Chen.
Right.
She's just a legend, right? And she was so generous, and to do scenes with Joan Chen and Yoon Yo Jung, a legend of Chinese cinema and a legend of Korean cinema. How random in a way, and how rare, and it took a film like this that's so cross cultural in order to kind of put these two people together, and it was kind of the honor of a lifetime.
Yeah, and I thought this was going to be just a really funny film, and it is. It's a lot of fun, and there are moments that you just laugh out loud. But I just didn't expect that I would cry
Mhm.
so much. And for me at least, the waterworks happened in the scenes between the different generations, such as the ones between Angela and her mother May,
Yeah.
played by Kelly Marie Tran and Joan Chen, and of course Min and his grandmother, played by, as you said, Han Gi-chan and Yoon Ye-jung. And so, as fun as the young quartets are, and they're really fun, this portrayal of the older generation is really quite beautiful in this film. And the scene you mentioned of the two together, it is really quite something special to watch those two women share. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about the how you decide to portray the older generation in this film?
Yeah. You know, I knew that I wanted this film to explore parenthood, and I knew that so much of what influences our perspective on parenthood is our parents, you know, um, and so it felt really important to show, um, the previous generation in this kind of desire or goal to raise the next generation. It's all connected, and so I wanted to show a mother, and then very fortuitously with that script change, a grandmother. Um, I think what I was really interested in retaining from the original film is that the drama of the film doesn't come from hatred. There's no villain. The drama actually springs out of these characters kind of caring too much for each other, and that to me was really interesting, and I think feels very, like it feels very authentic, uh, like so much of the drama in our lives isn't, it's not so clear cut that there's like a villain, right? And and so I made this very conscious choice that like even the homophobia in the film is kind of pushed to the periphery. Like there's a grandfather character, and you never see
You
him
never
because
see him.
I didn't want to show that. I was more interested in this kind of grandmother's complicated love for her grandson, or this mother's complicated love for her daughter, and so it was a really I think it was a I was kind of taking my cues from the original film, which I think did that so beautifully, and it is something that in my own filmmaking I've practiced a lot, with Spa Night and Driveways and Fire Island. I don't think it's always so clean as like heroes and villains.
We just did a program with Lee Chang-dong, the
Wow.
Korean filmmaker,
Yeah, of
and
course.
he talked exactly that about that, how he doesn't like villains in his films because he said people are too complicated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but let's talk about you a little bit.
Okay.
So you started basically in the indie filmmaking
Mhm.
scene, and then you have moved on to sort of this. Would this be considered as a Hollywood movie these days? Is it still independent? I'm not even quite sure.
It's still an independent
Independent,
film.
right?
Yeah. I mean, we have distribution and we'll
Right.
have a theatrical, and so, it's um it has some more kind of opportunity, I
Right.
think. But yeah, still
Hmm.
technically an indie movie.
But you also work in the sort of the mainstream platforms and work with, sort of the streaming juggernauts like Bridgerton.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's I'm sure that was a very different experience. And then your last film, Fire Island, was on Hulu.
Mhm.
So how have you navigated all these different platforms?
Oh, it's been hard. It's really complicated because, you think you know how this industry works, and then you work on a different project, or you work with a different company, or you work at a different scale, and suddenly everything's different. The priorities are different. The processes are different. And so, in many ways, I think what I'm very kind of lucky to have is a certain kind of personality of adaptability. You just have to be able to like roll with it. And so that's been very helpful to me. And then, of course, just trying to stay focused on the creative work. The creative work more or less stays the same. As a director, it's how do you tell this story through, cinematography, through production design, and then, of course, through your actors. How do you, tell a story visually? These things, kind of regardless of the context around them, like I can feel safe in, and so the scene work that I did in Bridgerton, ultimately I was utilizing the same tools that I had and used in Spa Night. um, and so that's always really comforting to me, that I can always just go back to the craft. But it is something where I think I have an appetite for new experiences and new collaborators, because I think that's what makes an interesting career. I think about filmmakers like Ang Lee, who have gotten to do so many different types of movies over his career, from The Wedding Banquet to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to The Hulk, Brokeback Mountain, Life of Pi, like that seems like a fulfilling life, and so I really think of what opportunities I can take that will open me up to a new community, a new place, new topics, ideas. It's how I stay curious.
But what does it mean to be a director in Hollywood these days? Is that what you thought when you first started as a young filmmaker? I'm sure you had an idea of what kind of director you wanted to be or wanted to aspire to be. Then there's the reality of the business. Has it changed for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think filmmaking is such an expensive medium. Even micro budget features, are still often hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then, of course, you have movies that are, $100 million. They're very expensive to make. Whereas, it's like a novelist. If you have a laptop, you can make something. Pen and paper, even, if you want to go kind of old school. And so because filmmaking is so expensive as an art form, you do have to, be a business person in a way. You have to be aware of the economics of it. You can't fully deny it. And so I've had to learn that as I've been working. And it is the case that if you want to make a film at a certain budget level, you have to understand what the market wants or what the market values. And what is so frustrating is that sometimes what that is very unfair. Uh, like I wish there were more opportunities for Asian American stories, and more money for Asian American stories. But it's kind of this situation where it's there are only so many actors that the industry deems kind of valuable or green lightable. Um, and 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 so you have to, I think, kind of use kind of independent film as a way to kind of push on some of those notions and expand the industry. And so I'm kind of constantly assessing what the world looks like around me and how the industry is either reacting to it or not reacting to it. Um, I wish I could say my art was like super pure. Um, and I am holding on to very important values, but it is naive to not have to somehow, yeah, consider the business of what we're doing, um, and then hopefully understand that well enough where you can start to change it or to make it more equitable or more, more inclusive.
We're gonna go to a audience question pretty soon, and if you're joining us for our live webcast, you can send your questions via email, artsandculture@koreasociety.org. But speaking of what's going on around you and the business, and as a Korean American director who's working in Hollywood, do you feel the shift in how Korean culture is being received or interpreted? We talked about this when we did the program. Gosh, that was 5 years ago now.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
know. And even within that 5 year period, has a lot of things has happened. With the success of the films, obviously everybody talks about Parasite, but also with the series like the Squid Game and the Glory and the Moving. I mean, it's out there. The Korean products are out there. Do you see any sort of a shift in how people view sort of the Korean related products?
Yeah. You know, I, 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 I can't deny that there's kind of more interest, right? And that's kind of incredible to see. Um, you know, it kind of manifests in strange ways, and you know, kind of interestingly, like with the wedding banquet, um, you know, the Korean cultural elements, like they're held by the characters who are actually not my generation. Like Min, played by Han Gi-chan and Yoon Yo-jung, they're earlier generations. There's not a Korean American character in the wedding banquet that's the same generation as me, and I find that kind of fascinating. And honestly, it was not done intentionally per se, but I do think that for an American audience, like maybe it's still more comfortable or more expected to see a Korean character from Korea still, as opposed to like a Korean American character. Um, uh, it's, I remember kind of thinking about this film and how to put it together. And like, there was this feeling of like, oh, it's like, maybe we get a K-pop actor to play Min because people like K-pop, right? Um, and so yeah, it's kind of fascinating, and I don't know if that's totally true, but it's something that is kind of maybe percolating, and so I do wonder if I make another film that's kind of Korean American in the way that Spawnite was, how people might respond to that, and hopefully well, but maybe not. And then if that's the case, like how frustrating. But yeah, like I really wonder, like this is something that I've kind of felt for so much of my life, that like I feel very strong in kind of a Korean American identity, you know. But then there's like kind of Korean culture and Korean people from Korea that there's maybe a tension. I remember in college there were two Korean organizations on campus. There was a Korean American one, and then there was a Korean one. And people were like, "Why are there two?" And then all the Korean like students were like, "No, we know why." And so it's fascinating. It's kind of strange, but I'm uh, like I think in some ways there's a cool potential for like more solidarity and more opportunity, to like kind of bridge whatever gap may exist.
So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and somebody will bring the mic to you.
Oh, I'm first.
Mhm.
I was the first one here too. Pleasure meeting you. I have a quick question for you. I've worked with Christine Yu when
Mhm.
she did The Wedding Palace
Mhm.
and Benson Lee with Soul Searching.
Mhm.
How do you feel that the wedding banquet, do you feel it will ever be taken into Korea and viewed in Korea? Okay. Because I know it might be difficult, especially being, I think you're a Kyopo.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think it might be a little difficult. Have you crossed that barrier?
So,
Because you were saying like there's two, the Korean American group and the Korean
yeah,
Korean in
yeah.
college. It's the same way with filmmaking.
So we, I think things are kind of still kind of getting locked into place, but we feel very um, confident that the film will screen in Korea, and we have some, tentative plans, um, and so I think it will, it'll be in Korea, and I'll be very curious to see the response. I know that. I think maybe 2 years ago, the Busan Film Festival had a program about um, Korean diaspora filmmakers, and they had brought, Lee Isaac Chung, who directed Minari, and then also the Korean Canadian filmmaker Anthony Shim, who directed Rice Boy Sleeps. I know they went to Busan to have a panel and screenings, which is awesome. And even as far back as Spa Night, 2016, we got to screen our film at the Jeonju International Film Festival, and even had a small theatrical in Korea. So I think there's more and more interest. It may be tricky still, but it's kind of as good as it's been. You know.
I wish you the best.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey.
Hi.
First off, congratulations on this awesome career that you are continuing. Your storytelling is only getting better and better, by the way. And I love that Jay brought up that your storytelling involves a lot of not making things necessarily an issue, but just part of life. That said, are there any more stories that you still want? I mean, as a filmmaker, I'm sure there's still lots of stories you still want to tell. Are there any dream projects that you have that you want to share? Or
There's, I'm excited for a career where I can evolve and find new interests and be inspired. Um, I went to an organ concert in London with my parents when I was filming Bridgerton, and had this kind of incredible emotional experience listening to this organ player, and like I want to make a movie about an organ player. So I'm really trying to keep open to kind of what is around me and what inspires me. but I do think that it'll always be kind of a part of my work, a part of my process to, want to tell queer and Asian stories. Uh, you know, I'm interested to see how that manifests in each movie. I'm not totally sure, but I feel like I've gotten to where I am in my career by trusting my instincts and wanting to tell stories that I, would want to see.
Thank you. You mentioned that you worked with the artist Julia Chan. I love her
Um,
artwork. I was wondering how you connected with her and if you collaborated with her in the artwork that was in the film.
Yeah, I was connected with Julia through a friend who is a part of a group of Korean American visual artists who had done this incredible work to fundraise kind of during the pandemic, and they did art auctions and
I remember that.
yeah, and like I think I bought two art pieces from those auctions, um, and I emailed my friend Dave and asked him, "Do you know any artists who practice pojagi?" And he was like, "Do I have the artist for you?" And connected me to Julia. Um, uh, she we didn't commission any new work from her. We just looked at her wonderful portfolio and had a series of conversations about what thematically might work for the film. But once you see the film, you'll see kind of how important it was, and how inspired we were by her work, and really wove it in as kind of part of the story. And so, I think artists, um, it's so great to kind of be inspired by other artists. Like that's such a fun way to work, and the film is better, more meaningful because of Julia.
You got it. All right. Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned, right, or admiring Bowen's vulnerability, and then you also had mentioned a number of times complicated love, and these are themes that seem to recur in your work, right? You see this in Fire Island, you see this in Spa Night. So, what do these concepts mean to you?
Complicated love, vulnerability. I think that loving someone, I think really seeing someone, understanding their humanity is incredibly hard. I think it's really hard. And I think we exist in this world so often with walls up, because the world is a scary place and people can do terrible things to us. And so we have to protect ourselves, physically, emotionally. And and so, I'm really interested in creating art that can let people be vulnerable, both in the consumption of it, but also, in the making of it, like showing that vulnerability, um, and really being able to see each other. Um, it's 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 an incredibly. I think it is a lifelong process. I don't think you know anybody figures it out and understands like this is how I should relate to people and this is how I should treat people. At some point in your life, you don't suddenly know everything about that, and so it's. I think making these films. And using these films to kind of show that that like this is something we need to continually practice is a big part of like why I do what I do, because I think that that makes the world better.
I think we have time for one last question.
Has Ang Lee seen the movie, or do you know if he hasn't? Has he heard about it, and what are his thoughts?
Yeah, Aang's been incredibly supportive. He sent me messages, wishing me luck on the film. There was a very funny video message he sent me where he's eating soup at the same time. He's multitasking. He's a very busy man. And so he still hasn't had a chance to watch the movie. He's been incredibly busy trying to make his own films, and so we're finding the right opportunity. But very excited for him to see it. But again, he's been wonderfully generous, and I think really understands kind of the meaningfulness of our work as artists. That we draw upon previous generations in the hopes to inspire the next generation, and like I don't know what will happen in 30 years, but if someone wants to remake Spawn, like sure, go for it. But yes, I feel very thankful to be part of this legacy.
And I know that you've been just talking about this movie nonstop, and you'll continue to until it opens in theater near you on April 18th. But what's next?
This is my first time in my career having a proper theatrical, and so I'm really devoting a lot of time and energy to letting people know about this, and have people see it and enjoy it. I think I'm taking a moment to just kind of reabsorb kind of inspiration and energy. But I'd love to continue, working with these actors. I'd love to continue working with my collaborators. I think very soon I'll have, I'll have the itch, and then I'll make something new.
But maybe have a vacation.
Yeah, I know. I think so. Soon, yes.
Take care of yourself too.
I'll try.
And best of luck. And thank you so much for sharing this wonderful movie. And thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.